Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November meeting of the Public Works Committee. In attendance are co-chair Barbara Haynes-Burke, Councilmember Annette Scipio, and Councilmember John Larson. Before we get started, I'd like to make a little PSA here, public service announcement. Polls are open for another 35 minutes. This meeting will be on YouTube tomorrow. So if you're glued to your TV set watching us, you might want to, and haven't voted, please go vote because you'll be able to catch up on this later. So that being said, I have polled the committee members and there are no requests to pull any items from the consent agenda. So if I could get a motion to approve the balance, I'd appreciate it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Vote when given the opportunity. There we go. Thank you very much. And City Clerk, if we could have item G1, please.
Item G1, request for public hearing on an ordinance amendment to the Unified Development Ordinances to add use-specific standards to pesticides, fertilizer, and other agriculture chemical manufacturing, explosives and pyrotechnics manufacturing, and battery manufacturing, UDO-CC 17.
Thank you. And this is in response to our near tragedy at Weaver Fertilizer Plant. Steve Smotherman is here to brief us tonight.
Good evening, Chair McIntosh, Vice Chair Burke, and the other council members. Thank you. As I told the manager, I hope I can keep your attention for 5 minutes. We'll see. But tonight we're going to give you an update about the text amendment that was prepared in response to your committee's request and concern related to the Winston Weaver fire. And this amendment is aimed at achieving greater land use protections for potentially harmful industrial uses. These parameters of the proposed text were previously discussed at your June meeting. As you know, the Winston Weaver plant fire in early 2022, early this year, led staff to assess our current land use regulations for such facilities. We researched in North Carolina peer cities how they address fertilizer plants through zoning regulations and other requirements. And the peer cities included Charlotte, Durham, Fayetteville, Greensboro, and Raleigh. These fertilizer plants in all the cities were only allowed in the community's heaviest industrial district. And usually was classified as some form of chemical or high impact or hazardous manufacturing use. Additional use restrictions of note included some communities required a special use permit approval. Others had enhanced setbacks from residential areas. Some required a perimeter security wall fence. Some required a hazardous materials management plan. And Winston and Greensboro had water supply watershed restrictions. And this, I'm not going to go through this chart, but this tells you what the details for each of the peer communities related to those topics. Our current UDO regulations have fertilizer plants classified as chemical manufacturing based on the North American Industrial Classification System, or NAICS. Chemical and battery manufacturing, which is also included in this amendment, are 2 of 13 uses classified as manufacturing C. They're only allowed in our most intensive general industrial zoning district. And any use involving the manufacture of hazardous materials is prohibited within 1 mile of Salem Lake by watershed surface water supply regulations. The proposed regulations would apply to the following subset of manufacturing C. That would be chemical manufacturing uses that may involve ammonium nitrate. That is the key ingredient in all the fertilizer plants that have led to occasional mishaps. And these would include, by the NAICS code, pesticides, fertilizer, and agricultural chemical manufacturing. And as a separate one would be explosives and pyrotechnics or fireworks manufacturing. And then we also include battery manufacturing uses that may involve well, we include all of them because they may involve lithium. Our proposed amendment standards would say that these uses would be prohibited entirely from the public surface water supply watersheds as Salem Lake. The minimum site size would be 25 acres. The purpose of that size is to allow room for a minimum perimeter setback of 400 feet, which is close to the length of a city block, and that will be on all sides of the property. So that would be the setback for operations. There's one exception: parking areas can be located within 100 foot of the perimeter, which is also equivalent to our maximum buffer yard width. Again, any loading and unloading areas must abide by the 400-foot setback.
Did I miss it, or did you skip a page? Go back one page.
Did I skip a page? Yes, I did. Thank you. These use-specific standards shall only apply to new uses if this amendment is adopted from the date of adoption. So if there are any existing uses, they are exempt from these requirements as long as they stay on their existing site. If they move to a completely new site, they would need to abide by these regulations. And again, this use is only permitted in not only a general industrial district, but I should say a GI-S district. You would have to apply for a special use zoning district, which will require an accompanying site plan and public hearings before the planning board and city council. So that would give the neighbors and everybody a chance and opportunity to be involved in that process. And also, a hazardous materials management plan shall be submitted for approval prior to the issuance of a building permit. And I've gone over that, so I won't go over that again. Last couple of standards are security wall or fence, a minimum of 6 foot in height, shall enclose all the facilities associated with these uses from exterior property lines. And as far as landscaping, standard landscaping provisions shall apply, but all street yard landscaping areas shall be located outside security fencing, so those can be viewed from the street, so rather than having them inside. Public hearing was held before the planning board on October 13th. There were no speakers in support or opposition, and following the public hearing, the planning board recommended approval of this request by a 6-2 vote. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Committee members, questions for Steve? Councilmember Larson.
I'm sorry, I haven't picked it up, but what were the two objections? Two people in planning board objected to. What were their concerns?
I may need some help on what for you want to. I'll let you answer that.
Good afternoon, Chair McIntosh, Vice Chair Burke, and members of the committee. In regards to the planning board hearing, there were two members that had concerns. One of them was related to the fact that this ordinance might be too restrictive in certain cases, that a little more information might be needed. I think that person was advocating more on something that was very site-specific in terms of requirements, and that was something that staff did explore and found to be somewhat of an untenable position in terms of developing ordinance language that would be so specific. The more substantive concerns were from another planning board member. He had about 7 or 8 points that I believe staff actually forwarded to council members and kind of detailed our responses to those points. But they generally related to the fact that unified development ordinances, planning codes are probably not the best place to address the issue that happened at Weaver. And to that point, staff would say, this is certainly a tool, but it's not the only tool in the toolbox. He had some concerns about perceived inadequacy of a 400-foot setback, things of that nature, which again, staff's point was, if it's a true explosive event, that may be inadequate, but this is something that would still be legally defensible and not be considered a taking in terms of North Carolina land use law, but would still be multiple magnitudes stronger than the very minimal requirements that are in the UDO currently, basically between 0 and 40 feet, depending on if the site is adjacent to residential or single family. There were also concerns related to not taking into account the fire code and building code and things of that into this ordinance, which again, changes to that would require a legislative change at the state level, because those are documents prepared by the State Code Council, and there's also some things related to national fire standards, things of that nature. Those are kind of some of the high points. There were also concerns related to a perception that this ordinance wouldn't apply to Weaver, which wouldn't be the case actually, so long as this council adopts an ordinance like this before Weaver would attempt to rebuild. We could actually regulate them under this code because they wouldn't be grandfathered since there's technically nothing on the site currently. So again, Chairman McIntosh, those are some of the highlights, but I'll be glad to answer any other questions.
Can I ask staff to resend that out to council? Because I think George had some really good questions and questions that we've heard from the public, and it really did kind of cover the gamut of, it allowed staff to respond and say, this is within our powers to do, legally, or this is in the realm of the state or the federal government. So it was a really good sort of walkthrough of all the objections and the common sense or the technical reasons why we could or could not do certain things. The spacing, I know right after the event, I asked if we could set it at a mile, and staff came back and said, no, you can't do that. I mean, because you'd be taking everybody's land within that radius. So anyway, I thought the responses were very well thought out. So if we could get that sent around to council members, it's in our packet. But if we can send it to the entire council, I think that would be great.
We'll send that out
As a follow-up.
in the next day.
Great. Other questions?
I did.
Go ahead.
I'll come back to you, John. Councilmember Scipio.
Oh, yes, one of the questions that was asked at the planning board was implied that the fire marshals were not consulted in putting this together. So were they consulted in putting together this revised ordinance?
Councilmember Scipio, they were. In fact, Steve reached out to Mike Morton, one of our deputy fire marshals, who presented to this body earlier in the year and also presented to the planning board. And again, the fire marshals are actually somewhat limited in themselves by regard to the National Fire Code and ammonium nitrate not even being considered a hazardous material per the National Fire Code. But I'll let Steve add anything I'm missing on this.
Yeah, it's a hazardous material, but it's not listed as an explosive. And you say, what? But in its pure state, ammonium nitrate just burns. But if it gets mixed with contaminants like wood chips, dust, straw, paper, then if conditions are right, then it can explode. It has its own chapter in the National Fire Code, and that's how they came down on it. So it's not, if it had been classified as an explosive, then the fire code do much, much more than it's set up to do.
And one follow-up question. I know another concern was how are we going, this is all about new manufacturing. And maybe Attorney Carmen can answer this one. What do we do about sites that are existing now that have potential to be hazardous? They would, i.e., be grandfathered, so we take no action. What do we do about the ongoing potential hazards of some other sites?
I think we're limited in terms of what we can do based upon the existing codes and things that would apply to them, in particular if they're active sites. So I'm not sure if planning staff has anything else to add to that, but.
Yes, so the UDO allows a one-time expansion up to 25% of building size or development size. So again, the sites would be legally grandfathered. They wouldn't have to upgrade to these existing conditions, but they couldn't kind of expand under the ordinance as if they were new sites unless they complied with this development. Now, if they wanted to add another building on the site, and let's say they had the 25 acres and they could make the setbacks work and some of those things, they could certainly expand. But if they were just non-compliant to the new code, they would be limited to the UDO's provisions related to nonconformity.
And do we know if there are any sites that exist in our city right now that are potential hazards? Under this, with these chemicals?
Well, I found a WFDD report that mentioned 6 hazardous storage
Okay.
companies, hazardous material storage. One of them was Pet Dairy, and they do not meet the definition of a chemical manufacturing. The only one that came close was Ecolab K Chemical. Since it is listed, it is chemical manufacturing, but it is not, it is listed as soaps, cleaning, and toiletry preparation, which we removed because that would include there are a lot of companies in the region that make industrial degreasers or hand cleaners. That is what K Chemical does. And that's not, we don't think that that's considered to be a potential threat off-site. Procter & Gamble in Greensboro would fall under that category. They make Crest toothpaste, Olay skincare products, and Secret deodorant. So there are companies here. If we were to include all that, it would put Winston-Salem at a competitive disadvantage relative to other communities for some uses that likelihood of having an explosion are very slim. So we did go back to the manufacturing C and took out, if you took out the cleaning, we took out paints and coatings because High Points has 2 or 3 manufacturing companies that manufacture paint or coatings, and haven't heard, doesn't mean they don't have a fire or something, but I haven't heard of any explosions. And also pharmaceutical and medicine manufacturing, which High Point has a banner, PharmaCaps, which for pharmaceutical companies, they particularly manufacturers, they got to keep that facility very, very clean. So there's not much of a threat. And then medicine manufacturing, Vicks Vapor Rub has been produced in Greensboro since the early 1900s.
If I can editorialize here, we used to be able to require companies who are doing business within the city limits to get a privilege license. That allowed us to know who was doing business in Winston-Salem. We no longer have that ability based on state statute. So it's not an easy effort to just scroll through the list to see what businesses are actually operating.
I did and I can't guarantee that there's not one out there, but I did an internet search for pesticide manufacturing, fertilizer manufacturing, and other agricultural products, and explosives, and searched with different search words and things like that. And the closest one I could find was Ecolab K Chemical, which is not included in this amendment.
Is it a safe assumption to say that we also take information from the fire department as they're doing their inspections? Do they correspond with, do they make that information available?
I will double check. They did not mention any.
Yeah, that seems like it would be a good
I
way
will
to.
double check. They do periodic inspections on a 1-year to 3-year basis based on the type of use.
And Councilmember McIntosh, just to let you know, we also did reach out directly to Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., and they didn't turn up anything different than what Steve already alluded to.
Great.
So we have tried to kind of look at this from different perspectives.
Good. Councilmember Larson.
Well, I'm encouraged by this piece of work. I mean, it obviously is tackling a difficult topic. I'm assuming that the Winston Weaver plant cannot go back on its existing site, that we will not see that resurrected as an operation in the city.
until the council adopts an ordinance such as what's proposed, if they decided to pull a permit tomorrow, they could theoretically go back under existing codes. But if this ordinance were put into place, then they could no longer go back because there's nothing on the site to be grandfathered.
So the other observation that I would have is the 400-foot setbacks that you're suggesting are interesting. And clearly the zoning requirements of industrial zoning and sort of trying to protect the perimeter areas. But one of the problems I think we witnessed with Weaver was that residential crept in on the site. And if we have other operations that are also dangerous, are we seeing that same sort of residential creep up against these industrial sites? Is that a matter of zoning that we should be more cognizant of, or what?
So certainly, the issue with Weaver could be said for a lot of manufacturing facilities in Winston-Salem, in the fact that it was just existing at such an early point in the city's development. 1939, I believe, is the date of the initial permit, and I mean, Winston-Salem, of course, came into being in 1913, so not too long after the city kind of coming together. And at the time, it was in a quasi-rural setting, and over time, residential development, for various reasons, chose to move closer to that industrial area. There's absolutely other facilities in the community that have had that same pattern take place. That being said, I'm not aware, our staff isn't aware of any that have the same level of inherent hazard in what's taking place in those facilities. So it's more the traditional impacts of industrial development, such as noise and maybe smells or things of that nature. But this is really kind of unique, as Steve alluded to when we were doing some research, if there could be other situations that could be potentially hazardous to this degree with residential.
So do we need a public hearing on this?
This item would need a public hearing, so we would need a motion from this committee for this item with a recommendation to go to the full council.
That's on December
Other
5th,
questions?
right?
I've got just a couple of quick ones. One is not a question, but more an observation. The fact that if Weaver decided to build back under this new proposed regulation, it would be a special use permit, which means it would be under the glare of both the public, the planning board, and full council.
And it would actually not be a special use permit, council member, it would be a special use rezoning. So it would give the board or the council even more discretion to approve or deny.
Right, so spotlights would be on it, everybody would, it would be fully transparent, people would have
Two
plenty of
public
opportunity
hearings.
to weigh in, so that's very reassuring. Just a quick question about the height of the fence, 6 foot, some of the others that had fence requirements were at 8 foot. Was there a reason for that?
We just went with that because there are several other use conditions in the ordinance that have 6-foot high fencing already, such as transmission tower compounds or trash can screenings, things of that nature. So it was just for consistency.
Right, and my other observation is this does not close the book on how we deal with the ramifications of the Weaver fire. This is a step that we know we need to take, but it does not close the door on other options that come forward, other changes that either this committee or other council members would like to make in the future. So if I could, yes.
One quick add. There is an existing battery manufacturer in the county, which is Clarios, which used to be Johnson Controls. But they are located in Walkertown.
Right.
There is an existing battery manufacturer in the county.
So I wonder if the county would want to look at.
We are going to be taking this ordinance to the county.
Right. Perfect. Okay, could I get a motion on this?
What do we actually?
We're moving to bring this to full council for a vote first week of December.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right. Moved and approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I guess the voting machines are all really busy right now.
Right.
Last vote's getting in.
Okay, item G2, please.
Item G2, presentation on fleet services use of alternative fuel technologies.
I see both Ms. Poplawski and Mr. Geis in the audience.
Good evening, Chair McIntosh, Vice Chair Burke, members of the Council Committee.
Good evening.
Purpose of this presentation is just going to be to give you a high-level overview of where Fleet Services is currently using alternative fuel technologies, as well as give you an idea of where we're going in the future with our fleet service needs. So our current fleet, we touched on this briefly in a few meetings the past couple weeks. We have about 1,478 rolling stock vehicles, which excludes trailers and construction equipment. Of that, 550 vehicles are using some sort of alternative fuel technology, which is about 37% of our fleet.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is everything except Worcester.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Worcester is not in here.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am. First technology I wanted to touch on was our propane or auto gas. What this is, we had a Clean Fuels Advanced Technology Grant in fiscal year 18-19, which retrofitted gasoline engines to clean burning, low carbon LPG or propane auto gas. We did 30 conversions then, focused mostly on 1,500 to 3,500 series pickup trucks. The reason we did that segment is because they have historically low gas mileage. MPG in the 6 to 8 range, that's a high user, high return on that investment. That effort reached across 12 departments. So it is implemented through various departments in the city at this point, and we are working right now on demoing 2 of the same units in Winston-Salem police vehicles. The systems we utilize are called bi-fuel systems, and what that means is they run on both propane and on gasoline. They're designed to start up and crank using gasoline. When they get to running temperature, they automatically transition over to propane usage. Based on that model, it's generally a 90 to 95% usage rate on propane. So when we do this modeling, we talk about the green impacts and the reduction of emissions, we do a conservative estimate of 90% usage. And that's what we see reflected here. A 90% usage rate, we significantly reduce our greenhouse gas, 60% carbon monoxide, 18 to 25% carbon dioxide, and 20% nitrogen dioxide.
At one point, I thought, I remember that we had compressed natural gas.
Yes, sir.
Is that still?
We no longer use that. That's been phased out.
Okay. And the cost to retrofit a pickup truck is around $7,000?
Well, the units themselves are $7,500. With installation, it's about $9,000.
Okay, thank you.
So when we talk about propane retrofits, what that means is the vehicle is sent out of the shop, or the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, with a gasoline engine. We work with Alliance Auto Gas, our partner, to make sure we do not void the warranty. And we get EPA certification. Once the work is done, the EPA inspects it, makes sure it's good quality and that the emissions are being met. Once we get that certification, those come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty and a certificate that basically, a statement that does not void the original warranty. So we work with the manufacturers, make sure it's done correctly, and make sure we're getting what we need to. For fiscal year 21-22, we utilized 9,800 gallons of propane. That is a gas gallon equivalent of 7,369 because it takes 1.33 gallons of propane to burn what would be 1 gallon of gasoline. So there is a conversion in that process. It's not 1 gallon to 1 gallon. I've got carbon dioxide on all these slides, kind of show you what that effort looks like, because there's a lot of different metrics. This carbon dioxide shows you across the board what we are getting in return for these. So for this particular investment on the 37 vehicles we have it on for fiscal year 21-22, we offset 65.5 metric tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of 14 gas vehicles driving for a year and about 162,000 miles.
Can I ask a question about the retrofit?
Yes, sir.
How How big of a tank are we dealing with? You're dealing with two capacity tanks, one for LP and one for gasoline.
Yes, sir. So the gasoline is uninterrupted. Whatever the tank size is from the manufacturer stays, and we're installing 18-gallon gas gallon equivalents on all the retrofits.
So the other one goes in the trunk, or where?
It stays put. Depends on the vehicle. Some of our pickup trucks we've done right underneath, right behind where the other gas tank would be as well.
What's the capacity? What's the LP?
18-gallon gas gallon equivalent.
18 gallons.
Yes, sir.
So what does that do to the weight of the vehicle?
It increases it a little bit, especially because the tanks for the propane retrofits are hardened structures. They're about 20 times more rigid than your standard gasoline,
Right.
just to add additional protection. The exact weight of that, I'm uncertain. I can get that number for you, sir.
It's a good system. It's a good breakout system, but we may have moved beyond that. I'm just curious. We still retrofitting LP? Is that still a preferred treatment?
Yes, sir. So LP is the largest alternative fuel currently in use in the auto industry. There's about 23 million vehicles worldwide that have it. Europe has leaned into getting it from the manufacturers. United States is focused more on retrofitting. We are working to do more retrofitting in this current fiscal year, which I'll touch on, but we're trying to seek the same grant we had in 18-19 to do 30 additional units to continue to see those benefits.
So we have two police vehicles with this LP in it now,
Yes, sir.
and the performance seems to be satisfactory.
The performance for the difference between gasoline and the propane actually increases performance. Your octane rating on propane is between 100 and 102 octane, whereas your standard octane is between 85, 87, 92 range for gasoline.
Very, very interesting. Thank you.
And it burns cleaner. It's low carbon, so it doesn't have as many carbon emissions in the engine, so the wear and tear on the vehicles themselves is less maintenance over the life of the vehicle.
It costs about, you said it's costing us about $8,000?
About $9,000, yes, sir.
$9,000 per vehicle.
Yes, sir. And we have secured thus far grant funding to assist us with that. So we've not had the full board of installation costs.
And the cost of the fuel itself is significantly lower.
Yes, sir. We're averaging over the last year about a $1.05 difference per gallon difference. Yes, ma'am.
But did I hear you say that the maintenance is less, and therefore are we keeping the vehicles longer?
We haven't gotten to
that yet.
From 1819, we are still keeping those large number of those vehicles in our fleet that are not propane. But we do anticipate to see that because there's less carbon buildup in the engine, less wear and tear, less things that are going wrong because we're burning cleaner fuel.
I mean, where I'm going with this is, I was advocating hybrids or EV vehicles as we look at particularly police response pursuit vehicles. And, I'm glad that we're running a test on these and seeing how they work out. I just don't know what the downside is yet, quite understanding that.
Well, availability is one thing.
Yes.
These are available off the shelf right now, we can get them.
Right.
But if we want to do a fully electric pickup truck, we got to wait till 2023 when the Ford Lightning is out there, and the Chevy pickup truck is not till 2024. So availability is really the key. You're doing the best you can with what's available.
Yes, sir, and that's the goal. And to note, those ordering windows you're talking about is when you can place the orders.
Right.
So there will be a significant delay after that order as well on those electric vehicles.
Okay.
Okay. So the next alternative fuel we are using is biodiesel. And biodiesel, like propane, is 100% domestic product. So we're trying to go American-made as well in our efforts to go green. It's made out of vegetable oils, animal fats, and recycled restaurant grease. The way it works, to get biodiesel, you blend the biodiesel with standard petroleum diesel. You get blends, and B5 is what we use at the city, which means 5% biodiesel blended with 95% petroleum diesel. You can go all the way up to B100, which is 100% biodiesel. But the reason we use B5 is because all the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, have certified B5 biodiesel for use in all engines. So it's just called diesel from their end. So we only have to have one tank. We can use it, and we can get the benefits citywide, which is why it's our largest alternative fuel currently, because of the large vehicles we have that use diesel fuel.
Besides, B100 smells like French fries.
Yes, it does.
So I'm sorry, Chairman, what's the supply chain on that? How is that procured and
Biodiesel is just like regular diesel. It's up and down. We have market volatility. Availability is an issue right now. When the pipeline shuts down, biofuels also shut down, which is another reason why we've, I'll explain a little bit later on the future of propane use. We've targeted public safety vehicles to ensure response time as an alternative fuel should we have market volatility or pipeline shutdowns. We're guaranteed we have police response was also part of our thought.
So if biodiesel becomes a problem, we can run straight diesel?
Yes, sir. And the reason that biodiesel is considered an alternative fuel is because it is energy positive. Essentially, from the time it's planted in the ground, they do life cycle analysis from when it's planted, harvested, burned, and the energy all the way through the life cycle through these biodiesels is shown to be 5% for B5 reduction in carbon versus burning standard diesel. So it's a life cycle cost. B5 is 5%. I believe B20 is 10 or 12% now. So we're working towards that way. If we were able to increase our percentages, we would also see that return on investment. For fiscal year 21-22, we burned 489,000 gallons or utilized 489,000 gallons of B5. To keep it consistent, that's 4,968 metric tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of 1,070 gas-powered vehicles for over 1 year of 12 million miles taken down off the street.
But you're saying that only reduces the carbon dioxide by 5%?
Yes, sir. From the life cycle costs. You get a 5% return from utilizing biofuels versus standard diesel.
Not a lot, is it?
No, sir. But at the rates we're seeing and the usage we have, we're getting a significant reduction.
We're in this gray zone right now of looking for alternatives, and I admire your flexibility in trying different things and sort of nudging us along. I'm just trying to understand where the best performance is and where we should be putting our dime down on this.
With the biodiesel, I touched on it with the propane as well. Biodiesel lubricates the internals of the engines better than standard diesel. So we are anticipating that we will see an extension of life use out of these vehicles with less wear and tear. Because in diesel engines specifically, the ability to lubricate the internal components is essential.
I'm just trying to get us away from carbon dioxide. I'm looking for trying to reduce our carbon footprint predominantly.
Yes, sir.
I think is where we have to go.
Yes, sir. And we're looking at, we're hopeful that we can expand the percentage of biofuels as we go forward. There are concerns about that in our climate. The higher percentage that you get in mixtures, the less combustible it is in cold weather. And also you start to at 20%, B20 and above, you start to lose energy 1 to 2% once you go up to B20 and above. So there are some negatives to it, but we are hopeful we can expand in that direction to get a greater return on our carbon offset by using the same fuels that we have to as we transition to alternative fuel vehicles.
And not every vehicle that we use biodiesel in will have an EV equivalent.
That's correct. Right now, these are majority heavy-duty vehicles. The medium-duty segment and light-duty are your prime EVs right now at this point.
But you see Mack and Volvo and everybody else, Freightliner, moving in that direction. But again, it's a matter of time till it's available.
And we are on the pulse of that. We're trying to actively engage in looking at it for refuse and recycling collection. The issue we have right now is the battery life with the size of our routes would require a 30-minute dwelling or a 30-minute charge at the landfill per disposal. And so we're hopeful that as the battery life and battery technology improves, it can meet our demands locally so we can use that heavy equipment.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, hybrid vehicles are our next one. And hybrid vehicles, they work. They're right there in that picture. That's our 2022-23 Toyota Camry hybrids. We bought 10 of these last year for our fleet. And the little indicator on the bottom is actually a display from inside the vehicle that's very helpful to explain how they work. Hybrid vehicles, they have an internal combustion engine or your standard engine, but they also have electric motors in it to assist the vehicle. Energy is stored in these batteries. The battery, and this is in the back of the vehicle. The way we do not plug these in, these are recharged by themselves through a process called regenerative braking. To keep it simple, standard braking, you use friction. your pads, rotors, they slow you down, they generate heat. Heat's dissipated, we lose that energy that was generated. Regenerative braking is a little bit different on electric and hybrid electric vehicles. To dumb it down significantly, the energy, when your vehicle has this battery technology, the battery assists to move your vehicle forward. As your vehicle is moving forward, it uses the battery to power it. When you begin to apply the brake, the torque on the opposite direction that the vehicle is working in will start to capture that energy and send it back through the electric motor, where the motor acts like a generator and sends that power back to the battery to be captured and stored. So the more braking you do, the harder the braking is, the more regenerative charging you have of that, with the exception of emergency braking. When these vehicles get into emergency braking situations, 99% old standard braking that's done through friction. These vehicles currently, these 10 vehicles right here, the Camrys we acquired, the standard Camrys we ordered are getting 32 miles a gallon, 30 to 32 miles a gallon with a 4-cylinder. These have turned out 50 to 52 miles per gallon on average. So it's about a 20 mile per gallon difference between the standard with the hybrid technology on it. The technology hybrid, the batteries are used mostly at low speeds, idling, and when you're at cruising speed on the highways. So there are certain times that you can utilize that hybrid push to get that economy and fuel economy, advanced fuel economy. Based on just those 10 vehicles alone that we added to the fleet, we can save about 144 gallons a year based on normal usage, which is about 12,000 miles now, and 144 gallons a year in gasoline that we won't be using in our tanks for these vehicles. Any questions on the hybrid?
What's the delta in cost between a hybrid and a standard version?
I believe these were about $4,500. I can double check that for you. That's the number I have in my mind.
Seems like that gets made up pretty quickly in
Yes, sir.
maintenance and
On the, I can tell you for sure, though, on the police interceptors we just put through for purchase, the difference was $3,100. Electric vehicles are our next technology. So currently we have 2 electric vehicles in our fleet. The Chevy Volt that's pictured, and I need to come clean. Anybody watching on TV who's a electric vehicle nut is yelling at the TV right now. This is an extended range hybrid plug-in vehicle. Technically, what that means is it's got an internal combustion engine. So this is used, the technology on this would be used normally to extend the range of that internal combustion engine. However, when placing this into our fleet, we did a duty cycle analysis to look at how it can be used to be utilizing 99% on the electric mode. And we found an operation that has the range on that vehicle, the electric range is between 30 to 60 miles. So what operation can go between 30 to 60 miles on normal trips, come back and charge it? We placed it in with the Vegetation Management Division, and they've been operating it on the electric mode, even though there are times where they switch it over. I just didn't want everybody to panic saying that's not a full-on electric vehicle. It is not, but we've done some research on placement to figure out how to maximize that technology. We also have a Nissan Leaf, which is utilized by the Property and Facilities Management Department, and it gets about 70 to 100 miles of range. We have 2 charging stations currently. One is at Old City Yard at Vegetation Management, and one is at the Fleet Services Garage. Both of them are level 1 charging stations, dumb stations, so to speak, where you just plug the vehicle in. For the Chevy Volt, if the battery was on 0 to take a full charge on a level 1, you're looking at about 9 hours. For the Nissan Leaf, for the range it has, you're looking at about 19 or 20 hours.
Jeez.
So the standard protocols for these are whenever you return from a trip, plug them in to go ahead and get charged so we don't have to have that. But looking at dwell times at these facilities, if you were to run it to 0, the dwell time in the evenings with a lack of use and operations on both of them could give you a full charge for the morning.
the next generation of EVs, we're looking at 300 to 400 miles
Correct.
range. So,
Correct. I think the ones that were on the state contract were between 250 and 300.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's not efficient right now.
So brief discussion about where we're going with the future. And Councilmember Larson, I touched on this briefly. We have a clean fuels alternative technology application in with the state of North Carolina to get 30 more propane units for the police vehicles. These are the Ford Interceptors. And the reason we chose them, again, was partially because they're high utilization vehicles. Between 15 to 18,000 miles was the average. We are seeing that creep up now with the residency policy and being able to take your vehicle home. So we anticipate those to creep up. But using that also as an alternative fuel source and scarcity, we continue to get pipeline shutdown, messages that people are chasing diesel fuel. This adds a little bit of stability for the citizens to understand. We got a response, alternative fuel, should there be a catastrophic issue that disrupts supply. On these vehicles, we were looking at gas reduction about 738 gallons per vehicle, which translates over to a little over 22,000 gallons for all 30 vehicles if we're successful. You touched on the fuel savings. It's about a 30% savings on average compared to gas gallon equivalent. So just on these 30 vehicles alone, with the utilization in between 15 and 18,000 miles a year, we think about $55,000 in fuel savings costs from these 30 vehicles. The greenhouse gas and CO2 reduction is the equivalent of 43 gas vehicles driven about 500,000 miles for the year.
When are we expecting those pursuit vehicles?
The pursuit vehicles, they will get approved at council. Are you talking about the hybrid ones?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. They go to the next council meeting. Once they're approved, we place the order, and then that'll give us about a 235-day window. There will be some from 2022. We got a partial split order, so there's a possibility some could be in, I believe, May or June, but it will trickle in. And not to confuse, I'm on the hybrid. I think you were asking about the hybrids. That was the propane, the previous one. And propane, we should have an answer from the state in December whether or not we were approved successfully for that grant application. So the hybrid, the police is very interesting for hybrid, and that was part of the reason why we wanted to pursue the 5. The hybrid technology for this particular unit came out in 2020. So Ford, they've had it out on their model since 2020. The concerns with it were, could they handle the demand, the electricity demand that a police car has versus a standard car? They've proven that they have that. When they started rolling these vehicles out, they being Ford, they did a time motion study with some of the units and some of the departments they had to figure out how it's going, what's going on, how can we improve this technology. Ford's study revealed that approximately 60% of police time on shift is spent idling, parked, or waiting. So when we look at the gas mileage difference, we talk about what's the MPG, what's the difference in range while I'm driving. The difference between the hybrid vehicle and the standard vehicle is 7 miles when I'm driving, 7 miles per gallon on average. But when you're doing 60% of your time idling and sitting, there's a potential for that additional 60% of savings. So we projected that, or Ford projected that out. Look, if you're idling 60% of your time, it's generally on the battery with the electric because you're at low speeds, you're idling. That's a 60% additional savings. These numbers are from Ford. They may differ from our current climate, but it was a great study to see what are the advantages other than driving that police department and these police pursuit interceptors offer. And based on that, we're seeing 7 miles per gallon while driving, which is 340 gallons difference savings for each vehicle. And then the idle time at 60% is a potentially additional 725 gallons saved. So we're talking about potentially saving 1,000 gallons, 1,065 gallons per vehicle over those 5 vehicles a year, which would be the reduction of about 25,540 pounds of CO2, or the equivalent of 10 vehicles on the road for right over 100,000 miles. With the markup cost being at $3,100, you're saving on fuel. If we actualize these in our climate and economy, we would have a return on our investment in about a year. We've also, with the 3 pickup trucks we're working on, securing, we're going forward to purchase, we are looking for similar applications. We've identified some that have high idle while they're out in the field to try and recognize these when we roll those out into our implementation as well.
What is the delivery time on these?
On these units,
Yeah,
I believe it's that standard 260 some day window.
200 days, 200 and some days.
Yes, sir. That's right now with the supply chain, that between 180 and 260 is about a standard response on vehicles.
And we're looking at 5 of them
Yes, sir.
as a test, so
Yes, sir.
we won't know for 2 years really whether or not.
We should know sooner than that. We'll have internal controls to track the gas usage for each vehicle to see the return. Questionable about the battery life. We want to see that in real time.
All right, interesting, good, good.
Sir. Biodiesel of the future, we touched on this during the other part. Basically, we're trying to look to see is more OEMs certified to use a higher percentage. We want to jump there while we're looking to get out of using diesel where we can. As the electric model or electric market gets there, we will try and stay in step with them to develop that within the city. And electric vehicles, Councilmember McIntosh, you touched on the electric for refuse collection. I have driven this refuse chassis. It is amazing how quiet it is. You forget you're driving. The garbage men would be spoiled. They wouldn't hear all the noise and all that. It's very quiet. We have not yet had the pleasure of seeing with the body on, which is the back. We haven't seen an assembled unit yet. On Thursday of this week, Fleet Services management staff and procurement staff are going to an event where we will see a fully assembled one. What's nice about this vehicle is that potentially both the powertrain, the chassis, and the body can be 100% electric. And if that is actualized and we're able to get the battery technology, we would love it. It would be a no-brainer for our current operations.
This vehicle's gotten a lot of attention, and Mac has hit a home run with this one.
And that's why we can't get a demo unit. As soon as they get here, they're
Yeah.
sold. But we are looking to expand our fleet into electric vehicles when considering the challenges and opportunities of electric vehicles, the infrastructure, the training of staff, our facilities, all that's being factored into this transition into EVs. Fleet management staff has gone to several conferences and committees about successful transitions to EVs from other places. Raleigh's a big one. They have got a lot of lessons learned. We're learning from other communities that are further ahead of us to not repeat their mistakes, figure out how to efficiently do it. The staffing challenge and technician training is one we can't overlook. The default mentality when buying vehicles sometimes is, you got a factory warranty, send it to the factory. They are having the same difficulty we are getting technicians. So I would be, and Fleet Services would be remiss if we did not try to get opportunities to get grants and funding to train our in-house staff to be able to handle things should we run into that issue where they can't hire somebody to work on it. Does us no good to have the technology if it's not in service. So we've been working with DOT, sustainability, to look at some funding options to help us get there. The EECBG is the one I listed on this presentation. And that's the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. We have about $300,000 worth of funding for that for the city, and we are looking at how we can utilize the majority of that to invest into EVs, infrastructures, and training. There are some additional conversations that have come up since this was released, and some additional options. Some of them are the Inflation Reduction Act credits, and we're also looking into the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program and the Carbon Reduction Program. Overall, there's probably several $1 million of additional funding. All of that won't be for EV and EV infrastructure, but that's to say, when we were looking at supply chain issues, we defaulted to what we could get, which is the internal combustion engine. Unfortunately, at this point, we were tied to it. But there is funding available through grants to help us get where we need to get as we transition to electric.
Questions? Councilmember Larson.
I'm very excited to hear this, and thank you so much for bringing it forward. I was concerned last week, I guess, when we were seemingly focused on just buying standard internal combustion police cars, but clearly you guys are moving forward on a variety of fronts right now, trying to address this and keep up with the technology. It is going to be a challenge, but I do think there's federal money involved, and I think there's opportunities for us to leapfrog from one technology to another quickly. So I applaud that effort, and I appreciate this briefing. It's been very useful for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? No, so thank you very much. That was excellent. That was really good. It ran a little long, so I'm going to ask Matthew if he doesn't mind if we push his item G3 to next month or January, whichever. January is probably the realistic. But Nick, thank you so much. If you couldn't tell, I tend to geek out on this stuff pretty hard. The good thing is that the automotive industry will be all electric before we know it. The number of choices, the pricing, availability is all going to kind of crash on us like a tsunami. Right now, it's very difficult to get, but every manufacturer is heading in that direction in a hurry. Everybody wants to be there first. Tesla got there first, and the premium for Tesla is not worth buying them for the city. We'll leave it at that. But our choices and our cost structures will go down as we move forward, and I very much look forward to that. I don't want to overspend right now to get the improvement. I think it's coming at us pretty quickly, and it pays to be rational about how we bring that additional inventory in. Thank you very much. Okay. With that, is there anything else members of the committee would like to discuss? Any predictions on the outcome of tonight's election? No.
Good.
Okay, with that,
I look forward to Matthew's no carbon footprint solution to transportation needs next time we meet.
all right, with that, I will adjourn our meeting.